Hello everyone, welcome to part one of this bookshelf tour. Just figured I wanted to show you the stuff I have on my bookshelves, and so I'll probably do a video for each bookshelf. So starting with this one, we've got on this top shelf these two volumes called Lifestyle Illustration of the 50s and the 60s. These are really excellent reference books for just tracing the different styles of that era, and just really good for inspiration and whatnot. This is Above the Timberline by Gregory Manchess, who's an amazing illustrator, and a lot of the stuff in here is very, very much influenced by 1930s adventure, sort of diesel punk a bit, but really beautiful stuff. This is Wayne Barlow's Inferno, which is his take on hell, and one of the most interesting, fascinating art books that I have. You just get lost in it, really. It's amazing. And this is Wayne Barlow's Expedition, which is sort of like a sort of a naturalist account of extraterrestrial life on another planet, and that is also really fascinating to look at. Then we've got Barlow's Guide to Extraterrestrials, which is sort of very well rendered representation in this guide, which has, not your typical stuff when you think of sci-fi aliens. These are from books, so you've got stuff from Childhood's End, you've got stuff from Jack Vance's Noom, some from Dune, stuff like that. So, and I discovered a lot of books through that one. This is Bob Eggleton's illustrated version of H.G. Wells' First Men in the Moon. The illustrations in this one are pretty spectacular, really, really cool. And it's very profusely illustrated too. So, this is a art book of the SF art of Naoki Kato. And a lot of his stuff is very, very cool. Very detailed, very intricate, but also sort of like, I don't know, kind of beyond science fiction. Goes into sort of this magical realm a lot of the time. So yeah, that is very cool. This is just sort of a generic SF art book. It's more like a history of science fiction art, but there's a lot of good info in there and a lot of good art. So this was some kind of periodical put out by Ballantine, and it's just collects different art and short stories kind of in tandem with each other. So there's a really nice section about John Berkey in here. There's a little poem by Ray Bradbury written for this. There's a nice section on John Berkey, just talking about him and his studio and whatnot. Says that he would pipe sort of sounds of nature that were like from his backyard into his studio. This is Yarrow Fabry, who did sort of like, the kind of stuff you would see in magazines of that period, but they're very funny, and the styles are very, very cool. Frank Frazetta, of course, gotta have Frazetta. This is the Book of Job, illustrated by William Blake. And you've got the illustrations, but the text section has been heavily annotated by me because I'm writing a screenplay based on it. These are Gustave Doré's Bible illustrations. Yeah, not much else to add to that. A little illustrated biography of the Brontes, which I started reading. It's really interesting. These, I think from here on over, are my wife's cookbooks. But sort of segueing from cookbooks back to art books is Thiebaud. And he painted, just delicious looking cakes and whatnot, and just use the texture of the paint to really, make your mouth water, honestly, when you see them in person. Then there's some Andrew Wyeth books. I love Wyeth. I live 20 minutes, more or less, from the Chadds Ford Brandywine River Museum, so I kind of grew up around the scenery of his paintings. Some Chagall, Matisse, Miro, which I do like his abstract stuff a little. It's very pleasing. This, I really will be. You must forgive me. I've completely forgotten the name of this artist because this book was given to me by a friend who went to Russia and brought it back. So if you know the name of this artist, please tell me, because I have to ask him again. But this stuff is really wild, very detailed, very kind of, I don't know, sort of cosmic. I mean, you can't really tell, but the detail on this just keeps going and going. So then this book is something from my childhood. Not the same book, but the same copy, but this is a book I loved as a kid, and it's basically about these crew of a submarine. They encounter sentient dolphins, but it's full of really, really beautiful illustrations by many different illustrators at the time. Just really cool stuff. This is also a gift from a friend, a book on Francis Bacon. This is a book called Life and Death in Picasso. It's not very interesting. This is a book I've had since I was a kid. I love it. It's called D'Aulaire's Book of Greek Myths, and I know D'Aulaire, they did a book of Norse mythology that I've seen, but this is how I became familiar with Greek mythology, was through this book and the really beautiful illustrations in it. Next is Treasury of Fantastic and Mythological Creatures, which just has all kind of reproductions of different monsters from art history, all different cultures and painting movements and stuff, and it's really good for inspiration and just looking through. I love Dover books, by the way. Just really like cheap, but also really well put together compilations of art and older books. You've got Mucha. This is a book I read when I was a kid that got me familiar with art history when I was a little younger. Now we're getting into fiction and literature and nonfiction. So, first thing in here, Beowulf. Read it in high school, really liked it, want to read it again. Then you've got She and Aisha, Return of She. And those both were fantastic, and I made a video about She. Here is some Conan stories, but I realized later on that these were the L. Sprague de Camp kind of alterings of the original Robert E. Howard stories, and I kind of want to now find the original versions before I read this. I don't think I will read that then. These 4 paperbacks I bought from a place in Cape May, where this is the first Lensman book. This very interesting book called 43,000 Years Later. Silent Multitude, about something from space causes concrete to disintegrate. And then the Mind Warpers with the nice John Berkey cover. So I feel like one of those would be good for like a plane ride or a long train trip. This is Zumar, which is the novel that Ernie Kovacs wrote, kind of satirizing television, the industry, and all that. Okay, yeah, I made a video about this, The Nightland, by William Hope Hodgson, so see that. Not gonna add any more words to that. This is an excellent anthology called New Worlds for Old, and it's just fantasy short stories. The first one alone is one of the most incredible, just imaginative things I've ever read. So, and we've got Borges' Book of Imaginary Beings, and it's, you know, a list of various mythological, folkloric, and other being monsters, creatures from literature, and they're written, you know, the way it's written is very Borgesian. It's very fun. Then here's my Cordwainer Smith section. You've got 2 editions of Norstralia. One has a Bob Eggleton cover. You've got Instrumentality of Mankind, some short stories, another Space Lord short stories collection, which has the introduction by Cordwainer Smith. Then the Casher O'Neill stories. This is the Best of Cordwainer Smith, which has the timeline in it, this is the hardcover version of the Ballantine or Del Rey paperback, and then that series is I really loved it because they have the best of, you know, science fiction series. So you've got the best of Stanley G. Weinbaum, the best of C.L. Moore, the best of Murray Leinster, and the best of Robert Bloch. And these are really good to find because they're just a great collection of some of the early best stories of science fiction. Okay. Then we've got a book I really love, which are these 3 books. The Space Trilogy, Out of the Silent Planet, Paralandra, and That Hideous Strength are, when I started reading them, I couldn't put them down, and I think That Hideous Strength is my personal favorite, but it just deals in a lot of things that it comes from an angle that a lot of science fiction does not come from, namely sort of a Christian worldview, and one that doesn't really adhere to the sort of science progressive cult in a way, wherein just progress for its own sake will lead to betterment, you know. These are some poems by C.S. Lewis, which are actually really good. Especially this one about gnomes, which was very strange. This is a book that I also have a video about, so you should check that out. But it's a very short story. You can read it in a day. It's got some nice little stylish illustrations. But it's one of my favorite, you know, fiction tales. And before you jump to conclusions, this is not a furry compilation. Though it is called The Sound and the Furry. It's actually a collection of stories about a race of aliens called the Hokas, which basically they look like teddy bears in stature, more or less, and appearance. But what they do is, any piece of fiction, they can't tell between fiction and reality, so anything that they encounter, be it like a book or a movie or a play, they will sort of adopt it as their culture and basically play it off as real. So this leads to hilarious situations, kind of like Galaxy Quest. Basically, there is something almost literally like Galaxy Quest in this. So, but if Galaxy Quest also They also watched Don Juan, a play, or old Western books. So some of the funniest short stories I've ever read as well, which is not an easy thing to do in writing. So Alice in Wonderland, Through the Looking Glass, of course. This is a first edition of The Fox and the Hound. I think it's probably not. But yeah, that was a gift from Phil Mastropolitto, a good friend of mine, who's also a really talented artist. You should check out his stuff. I think he goes by Philip de Goya nowadays. There you've got a collection of Julio Cortázar stories, Blow Up being the one that inspired the movie Blow Up, which in this story it's, I think, even a little more creepy in some ways. But there's another story about a guy turning into an axolotl. There's another story which I'm pretty sure might have inspired the Trilogy of Terror segment with Karen Black in it, like the one with the fertility doll. Might be a case, but this is an issue of fantasy and science fiction. I just wanted to see what the magazine was like, and the stories were okay. There was nothing really amazing. This was a gift from another friend, which is some pleasant reading. This is something really funny. So this is the guidebook to an old Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade computer game, and this comes in the box. And basically, it's like the diary, the Grail diary, and you need to read it to basically beat the game. But I've kept that for a while. This is a book of surrealist games, and also kind of a history of like surrealism and what they did. And there's some pretty fun stuff in it. And then right next to that is another Dover collection, board and table games from many civilizations. And yeah, basically you can just learn to play ancient games, other games. I've been trying to teach myself to play what is it? Cribbage. And I made a cribbage board based on that. Then you've got The Slinks, which is a Russian post-apocalyptic novel, which I started reading, have not finished, but it's very fascinating. It's just like the first chapter involves the narrator describing these black flying rabbits, which are very hard to cook properly. Otherwise, you'll basically get really sick and grow hair in weird places and stuff. And then next to that is different kind of Russian SF is Roadside Picnic, or similar. Definitely post-apocalyptic in some ways, but yeah, different from Tarkovsky's movie of Stalker, but definitely a worthwhile read. And the mood is just really really tense. This is the liveliest art, just history of movies. I like reading older histories of cinema. They're just a little more, I don't know, direct. This is a book about Robert Capa, the photojournalist who's famous for doing the photos of the D-Day landing at Omaha Beach, I believe. This I haven't gotten to yet. This is about arts in America and a certain period. Utopia by Thomas More. Story of the Grail and the Passing of Arthur. And this is all retold by Howard Pyle and illustrated by Howard Pyle. Howard Pyle is another one of those Brandywine School artists. And we've got Three Musketeers, which my brother-in-law gifted me a few years ago, and I will get to it, believe me. This is The Adventures of Baron Munchausen, a very old copy with some very old illustrations in it, but I'm very looking forward to reading that because I've been wanting to read Baron Munchausen since the film is one of my favorite movies. Moonraker, which I have the Bond books scattered about here, but yeah, I really like these Penguin covers that they did. Yeah, definitely, if you find these ones, definitely pick them up, and anything with the original text. So there's Jerzy Kosinski's Painted Bird. Have not read it yet. This is sort of, I don't know, my area where stuff that needs to be read is I just bought this on a whim. There's a bookstore in Wildwood Crest, New Jersey, where a used bookstore that I always go to, and yeah, sometimes I'll just get some random stuff like that. This is Perfect Wagnerite by George Bernard Shaw. I really do love Wagner. So that's on the to-read list. This I have read. Ovid's Metamorphoses. There's like ink on it because I spilled ink while I was reading this for something. But yeah, good classical mythology. So this book used to be my dad's. The spine split. Like I had to tape this. But it's a fantastic collection of science fiction. It's where I discovered Gene Wolfe with The Fifth Head of Cerberus. There's this amazing, let me see. Yeah, you've got all Alfred Bester, C.M. Kornbluth, Stanislav Lem, Heinlein, Robert Sheckley, yeah, J.G. Ballard. But there's one short story in here that I really, really like, and it's about sort of this like time slippage, basically, that happens. And this father and son are walking home, and they start seeing dinosaurs, and the dinosaurs are like fighting, but they kind of fade away. They're almost like ghosts. It's called Triceratops, and it was a Japanese author. Can't remember the author's name, but some of you might. And we've got Borges. I do love me some Borges. I always remember the summer that I bought this book and just devoured it, and had a kind of an epiphany about writing. It just really inspired me. I'm like, yeah, I don't have to be like overly ornate and wordy to get crazy, interesting concepts across. This is some nonfiction selections, which is pretty cool. Has some film reviews that he did. This is along the same vein. Alberto Manguel's edited anthology of fantastic literature. I read this, some of these stories in high school. It was in our library. The story The Feather Pillow was maybe the standout, just how shocking it was, and that's a good campfire story. House of Leaves. It's House of Leaves. I've been meaning to read back through this again because it's I kind of want to read it and just read the Navidson record section. Just dispense with the Johnny Truant stuff. I really hate it. I hate that stuff. I just kind of want to read the Navidson record, like faux film analysis part of that. I just want to see what that's like. King in Yellow. Have not read it yet. This is a recent acquisition. Then along similar lines, we've got Shadows of Carcosa, which is a cosmic horror anthology, which has some really good stuff in that. The Rim of Morning. I might have talked about this before. William Sloane, 2 novels by him. Favorites, definitely some of the most extraordinary stories I've read. Then this is Jakob von Guten, very strange book. This was assigned for a class I had in college on the Quay brothers. They adapted this book, or I think something of it, into their film Institute Benjamenta. These are some very like beautiful, interesting magic realist stories by Silvina Ocampo. Went good with, like, kind of after I read Borges, I found this, and it was a nice companion piece, kind of. King Solomon's Mines, haven't read it yet, but since I loved She, I will be getting that. Started reading this, kind of trailed off. That's kind of how it goes. Borges, has said before, if you're reading something and you kind of lose interest, just put it aside. It's kind of like when you're reading for enjoyment, don't make it a chore. This I'm rereading lately. This is Dali's novel, and it's extraordinary and wild. I'm also taking notes on it to make a screenplay version of it. Paradise Lost, phenomenal. Love that. Inferno, I've read this about 3 times. It's Inferno. I love it. Bruno Schultz, one of the weirdest authors ever, but also just kind of mind-blowing in many ways. So I highly recommend it. At least reading Street of Crocodiles, that story. Shirley Jackson's Haunting of Hill House. I read this after I saw the Robert Wise film. This was pretty terrifying itself. The Big Sleep. This is my high school English teacher's copy, which I think he gave to me. And I love The Big Sleep. Terry Dowling, Rhinoceros, an Australian science fiction author who does a lot of really like amazing kind of world building with his Rhinoceros series. It's just like these, sail ships that go across the Australian desert and these sort of bioorganic towers. I can't get into it right now. This was a great book. It was different, Jewish tales of the supernatural with a focus on Lilith stories and just some really cool, really interesting lore. This is a book on one of my favorite musicians, Scott Walker, and it just goes through all of his songs, every song that he did an album or wrote, and it's some very good info in here too. A Not So Still Life was a really enjoyable autobiography by Jimmy Ernst, the son of Max Ernst, and it gave a lot of good perspective on sort of the period where artists were fleeing Europe during World War II and what it was like being in the art world in New York in 30s and 40s and so on. This is Viraconium. A friend of mine gave this to me, Phil Stankus. He's an amazing artist and animator as well. But I only read one story out of here in Viraconium, which was felt like a dream. Then there's The Best of Gene Wolfe. Really good short stories. What can I say? Gene Wolfe. Then this is the second half of the Book of the New Sun. The other half is over there somewhere, since I'm reading Claw of the Conciliator at the moment. Then this is Francis Schaeffer. It's 3 books by him. He's a really, really good theologian. I admire. I've been reading his stuff since high school. This was a gift from a good friend from Kentucky. Have not read it yet. World Spring. So this is Soviet science fiction short stories, a couple that I've read, and they're very interesting, especially the Surf of Mars, which was bizarre and interesting. So we've got, I think I just inherited this, or took it from my dad. It's Aristotle, then this American Patriots Handbook. We found this somewhere. This was, borrowed this from somebody and never asked for it back, and then I moved and realized I still had it. So this is a Moby Dick. I've read it once. I'm starting to try to read it again. But this one has some really nice illustrations in it. Alright, so now we're in comics land on this shelf. And there's a Pogo collection. I really like the line work and the inking in Pogo. And you've got Edward Gorey. I love Edward Gorey, just the sort of disquieting mood of it, the strange kind of humor of it. And here's my Cerebus collection. The first volume right now is being borrowed by Joel, but Cerebus is right now my favorite comic. Don't think that's likely to change, but I have only almost all the volumes. Actually, this one's I found this one signed by Dave Sim and Gerhard, so that was a good find. But so you got Minds, Guys, Story, and then Going Home, which is the latest one I got. There's only 2 more volumes I need, so the Meta Barons, which might be as like a standalone I don't know. It's like, in terms of just one volume, this probably be my favorite single volume of any comic. It's incredible. The art in this is absolutely astounding on a very consistent level. Yeah, it's highly recommended. The story is grand and mythic in a very unabashed way. It feels like it's, being made for the ages in a sense. This was is very rare and was very pricey when I found it. But this reprints all of the Arzak comics that Moebius did, even like stuff that takes place in that universe. Or I think it has Detour in there, so there's some non-Arzak stuff in there. But wish it was bigger. But it's hard to find. I can't believe I found that. Some Crazy Cat. This is a book that explains how different manga illustration techniques are done. So everything from screen tone to adding sort of like speed lines and markers, even Pantone colors and using pastels. So that's really cool. These are the early works of Winsor McCay, and they have all kinds of stuff from his editorial cartoons to Dream of the Rarebit Fiend. Yeah, with varying degrees of reproduction quality. Some are pretty abysmal, but they do admit that they just didn't have any better source to work from. But some volumes of the Nausicaa manga, I was kind of lukewarm on collecting it, even though it's very good. This I'm currently collecting, Gray, which is really good. I love the style, and the story is very, very good. And the events, like the way they happen, I just think this. Yeah, the story really is very serious about where it's going. But I also just the designs of the mechs and whatnot are very iconic in a way. Found this. I didn't even know there was a Gunhead manga. This is interesting. So it's the television scripts of the first 6 episodes of Captain Harlock, and these were translated, I think, from the original Japanese. Yeah. So King City, which is out of left field for me, but I found this, and based on somebody's recommendation, I checked it out, and I actually really enjoyed it, especially just kind of the world building and the fun being had with the medium. So I do like Brandon Graham's some of his stuff. This is the graphic novel of Giraffes and Horseback Salad, the unmade Salvador Dali script. It's pretty fun, and it actually technically has with it an image album, not with the book, but you can buy that. You can buy it online, and yeah, they produced this very nice soundtrack. They called it, but it's if you know what image albums are, it was something to kind of go along, not so much go along with the book, but I mean there are songs in it like they would have in a Marx Brothers movie sometimes, and that's kind of what they were going for. But they're really, really quite good. So that's a lot of fun to listen to. This is the Lost in Space Voyage to the Bottom of the Soul graphic novel, and yeah, I really liked that a lot, and I want to reread it again soon. But let's see, Spawn of Mars, which is the Wally Wood illustrated EC science fiction stories. Some really nice stuff. Hard to read sometimes. There's just so much text in those where I kind of end up just looking at the artwork. I don't really going through it. This is the first volume of the Trigan Empire, which is a British comic, but again, like the Meta Barons, it has really consistently beautiful painted artwork of this science fiction story. And then similarly, I have a volume of the Thunderbird comics done by Frank Bellamy, and these are just phenomenal. The coloring in them and everything, really spectacular. Silver Age, just a book about the Silver Age, but more in terms of like different artists. This was something that interesting. So the comic artist Alex Alice wanted to adapt Wagner's Ring Cycle into a comic, and this is beautiful too. This is actual like ink and watercolor, if I'm not mistaken. But and you might have seen the animated pilot film for this, but yeah, that didn't get turned into a feature. But he did make, I think, 3 volumes of this, which is very good. This just fell out of there. My wife made this for me back in the day. So yeah, Ghost in the Shell, I guess the first storyline manga, but I really enjoyed this one, and man, all those annotations and stuff. So this is, I don't actually have the Akira manga, but I've had this since high school, and this is just all the basically issue cover illustrations for Akira, along with, a bunch of other bonus stuff as well. I hear it's kind of I think the only way you can get this now is in the big reprint box set they have, but I would like to have that because I want the proper formatting for the comic. So this is the comic version of Alien, which was published in Heavy Metal. It has some very nice artwork. I think this is a volume of Harlan Ellison's Dream Corridor, which is all right, This is Comic Magazine, which actually had Mobius's version of the first of a section of the Meta Baron, which this section basically got redone by Juan Jimenez for the Meta Barons. But here it's done by Mobius. This is something I found at a record store in Philly called Long in the Tooth Records. They always have very interesting, weird stuff. And this comic collection by Victor Mora, Luis Garcia. Okay, yeah. But the artwork itself is really, really nice. Very, very realistic in some ways, and in other ways it gets very stylistic. But there's like a Western comic. I think in another one there's a fantasy comic. So yeah, that kind of came out of the blue, but I'm happy to have that in my collection. These are comics by my friend Phil Mastropolitano from years ago. His little rat character Filth, and the Daily Dread, which is sort of just like a comic strip. This was my first graphic novel called Vole. Kind of makes me cringe looking at it now. This is Comics, A History of Comic Books in America. It's a very good book, and it just covers American comics. And you've got, of course, Scott McCloud books, Understanding Comics, Making Comics, which I read this in high school, and that's where I heard about Cerebus and a bunch of other stuff. I'm very picky about manga and just comics in general, but I've got some Tezuka, some Blackjack, which is really, really good, and then Phoenix Future, which might be it's the volume I hear the most about, and it's definitely fantastic. This Azumanga Daioh, very funny. Battleship Yamato, haven't read the whole thing yet. This is an old anime movie guide by Helen McCarthy, and covers OVAs and feature films. These are the H.P. Lovecraft's At the Mountains of Madness adaptations by Go Tanabe, and they're by far the best visual adaptation of a Lovecraft work ever. Oh yeah, and then there's also this collection that he did, The Hound and Other Stories. Yeah, his style is really appropriate. I've seen some other adaptations in comics of Lovecraft, and a lot of times it's too simple, too cartoony. It's just really inappropriate. This is just very right. And yeah, and just the amount of detail you need for these things. And then later on when you get to some of the crazier stuff in Volume 2, it's phenomenal. Can't recommend that highly enough. Gone with the Wind, haven't read it yet. 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. I've listened to the audiobook narrated by Harlan Ellison, but this I just had it for the cover because I love giant squid. So, Architecture of Happiness. It's a very good book. I read it many years ago. Feels like many years ago, but it's just about how architecture affects kind of your mental state sometimes. This is Harlan Ellison's City on the Edge of Forever original screenplay, and just various drafts and kind of the behind the scenes of why it ended up the way it did. Harlan Ellison's The Other Glass Teat, which is about the other essays about television. So there was a period where I was really into Harlan Ellison, and he's fun to listen to, but I kind of got winded of him. So you have The Essential Ellison. This was very cool. Haruki Murakami, The Strange Library. It was just very dreamlike, weird, very short story. House on the Borderland by William Hope Hodgson. Really excellent, dark fantasy, I don't know, cosmic story. It's all over the place, but it's really fantastic. Dr. Faustus. I have not read it. No, I think I did actually in college. Now that I think about it, best short stories of J.G. Ballard. Where do I begin with this? Just surreal, but also kind of plausible at the same time. Yeah, really memorable, odd concepts. Just The Bride and the Bachelors. Something about avant-garde, which kind of fascinates me, at least. This is Moses Maimonides' book, Guide for the Perplexed. It's basically like a biblical commentary. Psychological Warfare by Paul M. Linebarger, aka Cordwainer Smith. I'm going to read this soon. I've been meaning to for a while. Gulliver's Travels. I read that years ago, and I want to reread it. Have not read any Ayn Rand. I might read this. Leonardo's Notebooks, so annotated, just notebooks. Very cool. These are scripts from the Marx Brothers radio play, Flywheel, Shyster and Flywheel. These are two books written by a friend of mine that he self-published. Yes, I think these are old covers for this. These are adventure books by Frank Peretti, like kids' adventure books, and these are awesome. You should really, if you've got kids, they should read these. If you can find these covers, though, the new covers suck, but like usually happens. But they've got like all kinds of stuff. Like this one's has to deal with the Nephilim. This one is like an island with a cult where they worship this giant snake. This one has to do with like time, holes in time and ghosts and stuff. This one has like these manta ray looking slugs that have like mind kind of poisoning slime, and really, really, really cool stuff. Let's see, I haven't read this. I borrowed that from Joel years ago. Didn't read it. Some childhood favorite book. Actually, the house book is a book of different just house layouts you can do. Just a lot of good reference stuff. This I found, which is really neat. It's all original artwork. It's just sort of a Where's Waldo, but with Pokemon. But I liked it because it only the second gen, and you've just still got original traditional illustration. A book on the Monkees that was my mom's, been signed by Peter Tork. A book about all the Monkees songs. My collection of I Spy books, which I treasure immensely. Same with these other ones from my childhood. These maze books called Amazing Mazes. Another one from my childhood, The Sign of the Seahorse by Graham Base. It's a very interesting story just with fish. And then probably know Animalia by Graham Base just with this alphabet, but every page is crammed with different things beginning with that letter and just beautiful illustrations. Another childhood favorite, The Salamander's Room. Book of favorite fairy tales. And this is the Dictionary of Imaginary Places. So in all kinds of fantasy like locations and whatnot are covered in here. The annotated H.P. Lovecraft, which is a really, really cool, it's got his stories, but it's also annotates to give context and stuff about like the locations and whatnot. Science fiction illustrated encyclopedia, really good overview of different authors and key works in science fiction. This is another visual encyclopedia, but this is gets into a lot of the nitty gritty with different sections on technology, aliens, alternate history, just any kind of topic you might want to cover. This was my aunt's who gave it to me. It was for the 30th anniversary of Star Trek in the 90s. Art of Cuphead, which is good. Animator Survival Kit. A Yoshitaka Amano art book. Another Amano art book with some different stuff in it that I like. This is a book of Disney inspirational sketches, so like basically like pre-production art, concept work. Really cool animation techniques, so it's all pre-digital stuff. I think they talk about computers in here, but I like collecting books that talk about these older kind of books that fell by the wayside. This is just a random fashion magazine I bought sometimes for reference, and also for drawing. This is Drawing the Head and Hands, maybe the best book on that subject that I've come across by Andrew Loomis. And if you've taken an animation course somewhere, you probably had to read this book or get it. Gianalberto Bendazzi cartoons. Book about Fantasia with a lot of artwork in it. This I was freaking shocked to find out they made a book about Destino, the Disney and Dali collaboration. But yeah, that's awesome. Since I love Dali, I love Destino. I think it's one of the better, more interesting things Disney's made in the last 20 years. This is the Atlantis illustrated script with concept art and the script, but yeah, I hear this one's rare too, and I wasn't even aware of that, but yeah, that's a really good one. I found that in the bargain bin at Borders back when Borders existed. This is the Evangelion design book, essentially. All the detail, all the stuff you could want to know. Get in depth with on Eva. Oh, I think this is stuck. Okay, this is all about Tezuko. An older Animerica publication about Gundam, which was back when not a lot of the series had been brought over to America. So when I was younger, reading about that was cool. And then this is the 8th MS Team technical manual. And this is a Palladium RPG book of Robotech the Sentinels, which I just happened to find at the used bookstore in Wildwood Crest. That was really funny. This is a storyboard book for Black Magic M66, the Shiro Masamune anime, actually. And then here are some Ghibli art books: Totoro, Spirit Away, Howl's, Nausicaa. This is actually the watercolor illustrations, Nausicaa, Kiki, and then one of the Miyazaki books, Turning Point. So yeah, that's shelf number 1. Oh yeah, and then you've got the Jerusalem Bible illustrated by Salvador Dali, and then the complete paintings of Dali. So yeah, that'll finish that one up. Stay tuned for shelf number 2.